Grow Dialogue. Um, a little bit about, I'm just going to introduce myself. So I'm Shani Goodson, and I have 3 kids actually. I'm gonna start there. Um, and I live near Atlanta. Um, and I'm really interested in this work, and I love this work because I think that communication is the basis for so much of our lives. And I think the only real currency is relationships, that our relationships are really what matter the most in this world, much more so than some of the other things that we value. So I love this work because it helps us focus more on our relationships and helps us strengthen them. And I think that's what brings quality to our lives.
Awesome. And hello, everyone. I'm Sunjata, and I'm really excited to be here with you all today and to share the information that we have to share with you all. A little about me. Again, I am also in the Metro Atlanta area. And in terms of family, because the focus of this particular webinar is more on the personal side, even though I know some folks have some business related questions that we'll touch on as well, but this particular webinar was to focus on the personal solutions or personal relationship side of the business. So a little bit about me personally is that I like to say within my relationships personally, I have 2 children, a daughter named Skyla, who's 15, and a son named Scotty, who's 11. And I have a very supportive village here with family and friends that really bring a lot of richness to my life. And the reason why I'm passionate about this work is I'm actually the founder of Grow Dialogue. In addition to being a partner, I'm a founder or the founder of Grow Dialogue. And I really got passionate about this work because I've just always had this belief that people can get along, no matter our differences, that people can get along. And beyond that, I've always really questioned why we don't do a better job of getting along. And I've taken that question with me throughout my adult life, and I've been really curious, and I've done a lot of research and reading about just the ways that we can get along better. And during my doctoral studies, I was introduced to this concept called authentic dialogue as a communication framework. And I got really excited because I felt like I finally had the answer to this burning question in my mind and in my heart about why people are so divided. And I felt like authentic dialogue was a solution because it gave us a communication framework, a communication paradigm that could take something that's very normal in human relationships, which is conflict. But instead of allowing conflict to separate us, authentic dialogue allows us to take that conflict and strengthen our relationships, no matter the context, personal relationships or business relationships. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about here today. And I'm really excited to do so. So let's see. Oh yeah. Yeah, please tell us where you are in the world. Say hi in the chat. Tell us where you are. That would be cool. Oh, and how you're feeling. Yeah. I would love to know where you all are zooming in from as well, if you don't mind dropping that in the chat. Okay, Seattle was here, Boston,
Hey, Boston,
Atlanta. T. Jamal's also in the Atlanta area. What's up? Okay.
Hey, Philly.
Philly, my hometown. I'm from Philly.
DC, Montreal, SoCal. Oh my gosh, you guys are everywhere. Miami. SoCal. Hey, Ty.
Thanks for joining us from Southern Cal. It's a little early there.
Lauderdale. Cool. Feeling
grateful. Yeah, Fort Lauderdale. Okay. Sunshine. Metro Atlanta as well.
We gotta link up.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna get started.
Let me share the screen.
Yeah. All right, y'all. So, like we said, this relationship is really going to be focused more on primarily building personal relationships. A lot of the questions we got are about business and work relationships. So we're going to touch on that as well, because it seems to be something that that we want to know about. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about that, but the majority of this webinar is going to be more about personal relationships. So what we're going to learn in this, what we're going to learn here, can't see the slides. Kind of do want to see them. There you go. So 3 things you're going to learn. And by the way, if any questions arise for you during our time together today, please drop your questions in the chat so that we can actually answer them. We have a Q&A section toward the end. So if any questions come up for you, please drop them in the chat so that we can answer questions in real time. So what you're going to learn today is a little bit surface about understanding authentic dialogue. We're going to give you a little bit of a taste of that. We're going to talk about the benefits of authentic dialogue, like basically why do we do it? Why do we take the time to communicate in this kind of special way? And we're going to give you some practical tips and ideas for how to implement authentic dialogue more in your personal relationships. All right. So these are components of authentic dialogue, but before we talk about that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the difference between a regular conversation and authentic dialogue. And we're going to talk a little bit about discussion versus debate versus dialogue. Now, I'm only going to talk about this really on the surface because if you go to more of our resources, we go more in depth there. So debate is how a lot of people approach difficult conversations. A lot of times their emotions are high and they're arguing. And so instead of listening to understand each other, your whole objective is to win. Your whole objective is for the other person to see your point of view and to adopt it, not just listen to understand. That's what we want in dialogue. We want more listening to understand. We're not trying to be right. We're just trying to understand. So instead of trying to get your point across, you're expressing yourself, and then you're empathetically listening to the other person who's also talking with you. So with that, I think Sunjata is going to tell us a little bit about these components that you see here on the screen that all come together to make authentic dialogue.
Yes. So you touched on a little bit about, empathy with empathetic listening, empathetic questioning. You also see tolerance and you see honest expression. So I believe that when most people hear the word authentic, you think honesty, right? Integrity, keeping it real, 100, right? And what that really is all about is, being just that, expressing yourself where the other person can truly understand your feelings. And a lot of times, depending on your relationship with someone, you may not have felt the psychological safety necessary to be authentic all the time. So I just want to acknowledge that can be the case. But once you continue to learn the things that we're teaching and you invite others into authentic dialogue, we teach you tips on how to go about creating that psychological safety. But I will say that, depending on who you're dealing with, it may take some time for you to build on, feeling safe, being vulnerable and fully expressive. But the key is, and the whole point of authentic dialogue is to create the conditions between you and someone else or other people in general, where you feel like you can be honest with one another and truly express yourselves. So the next important component is empathetic listening. So empathetic listening means to listen with your whole body, not just your ears. Okay, I think, we all understand empathy means to basically put ourselves in that other person's shoes and listen from their perspective and try to understand them, temporarily setting aside our own feelings, our own beliefs, just so that we can be more sensitive to what the other person is saying in the moment. But in addition to that, in addition to listening with our ears, we're also listening with our eyes. We're reading their cues, their body language. We're also using our intuition, that sixth sense, right? We're using our intuition to see if we can, pick up even some of the unspoken cues that a person may be, giving off when they are communicating with us about a given topic or issue. And after empathetic listening, it's really important to get into the practice of learning how to ask empathetic questions. And Empathetic questioning, which I'm gonna go a little bit deeper on the next slide, just going to touch on it just a little bit here. But empathetic questioning sends the message that I hear what you're saying, I care about what you're saying, and tell me more. I want to make sure that I'm understanding you in the way that you intend to be heard. And oftentimes when we're having a regular, let's say, discussion or debate, we may be listening to respond. And when you listen to respond, when that person's done speaking, you're just going rapid fire and responding. But when you're in authentic dialogue mode, one of the ways that you can signal to the other person that you're showing up differently, you're showing up in a way that you really want to be about solutions, be about caring and understanding and empathy, is that when a person is done giving their initial perspective, by asking an empathetic question to go deeper, to give them an opportunity to go deeper, to really get to the underlying needs, the underlying fears, the underlying concerns behind what they're expressing. And what I like to share all the time is that when you ask an empathetic question, if you're dealing with a conflict situation when tensions may be high, if you ask someone an empathetic question, their tensions tend to de-escalate, because now they realize, hold on, you really care about what I'm trying to get across because you're asking me questions. And empathetic questions are questions that, again, they're all about the person that you're asking. It's not about a need of you. It's not about a need of the asker. It's not about a leading question or some type of question that, is kind of manipulative in any way. It's really a question that's all about understanding them better. And when someone feels understood and someone feels heard, again, tensions de-escalate, and they're way more reasonable, and they're way more willing to work towards some common ground and win-win solutions, which authentic dialogue is all about. And then the last point I want to talk about is tolerance, because tolerance relieves us of the pressure of feeling like everyone must be the same. Tolerance is the ability to accept that people have different beliefs, different perspectives, different backgrounds, different cultures, all these different, experiences in their lives that, they're bringing to any given conversation, decision-making conversation, or conflict resolution conversation. Tolerance is just being in a position that as you're hearing things that may not be, a belief or a perspective that you hold, you're still holding space that person's beliefs and your person's beliefs don't have to compete. They both can live in this space together, and you can, again, work towards teasing out some common ground and ultimately working towards some win-win solutions. So just to go back to empathetic questions, I wanted to give you all some examples of what an empathetic question sounds like. So as you see here on your screen, some examples are, what do you need me to understand? Can you please expand on your last statement? What is your underlying fear or concern? Can you tell me how you came to that conclusion? The next one, which I really like doing, is paraphrasing back what I heard and then asking a person, is that correct? So you could say something like, so what I hear you saying is, and then you paraphrase back what you just heard. And then you say, is that correct? And what you're doing is you're giving them a chance to say, yes, you're hearing me the way I intend to be heard. Or you give them a chance to expand or to clarify if needed. And all of these things, once again, just show that you're showing up in a way that's empathetic, showing up in a way that you're wanting to learn. You're not here to win a fight. You're here to learn, okay? And you'll see the last three. I won't read the last three. I know they're there on your screen. So again, these are just some examples. We have some of these at our website. I see some people maybe taking some notes. At the resources tab of our website is where you'll find authentic dialogue resources. And that's where you'll also find examples of empathetic questions.
We'll drop that in the chat shortly. We'll drop that link directly in the chat if you want to click on the resources. All right. So let's talk a little bit about regular conversations versus authentic dialogue. Regular conversation, these are probably the types of conversations you have on a regular basis. These are low stakes, your everyday conversations, like, how are you? How was your weekend, right? And even talking about, your personal likes and dislikes and getting to know each other will also be part of like some regular conversation stuff, right? These are light, casual conversations. Sometimes people refer to them as small talk. and they typically stay on the surface, right? These are not the types of conversations where you're making some type of decision. These are not conversations where tensions are high or emotions are charged. These are just your regular, typical, everyday conversations.
Yeah. So, and also these tend to be like low stake conversations. Like I like to use the example with that. Like if you're trying to make a decision about, where we're going to eat for dinner, right? With a friend, a family member, a partner, typically that could be a discussion. You don't need authentic dialogue for that, right? That's just a quick discussion. Someone makes someone floats out an idea and the other person's like, and they make their case. And the other person may say, well, I want to go here and here's why. And the other person may push back and then it's like, okay, we'll just go with what you decide. There's really not much need for any in-depth learning or empathetic listening in that case. Okay. So what makes authentic dialogue different and, or when you should use it or when you can use it is for communication conversations that are more high stakes. So for example, conflict resolution, conversations. That's a great time to step into the paradigm and the communication framework of authentic dialogue. Another, opportunity to do so is when there is a decision-making conversation where two people or a group of people want to make a decision where, they want to collaborate on a decision. They want to make the decision in a way where everyone feels heard, everyone feels understood. And it's not in a top-down, someone has all the power and they make a final decision. It's a conversation where, again, several people who are peers, okay, or who operate in a manner where they're all collaborative, they're all equal, and there's mutual respect. How can we make a decision in that context? And authentic dialogue is great for that. And
the other thing to add one more to the authentic dialogue, if you want to express for your feelings, if there's something that you really want to express, even if it's not like something, a conflict or a decision, but something that's you want to just get off your chest with someone and you're not sure how they're going to react. So it's not necessarily making a decision or a conflict, but it's something that you're kind of worried about how they're going to react. That's a good time for deepening your personal relationships using authentic dialogue as well.
Yes. So yeah, I think that says it.
So let's take a moment here and let's reflect. We're going to have a little activity here that's going to help us distinguish between authentic dialogue and your everyday regular conversations. Okay. So let's do, it's like a self-reflection exercise. So get comfortable, take a few moments, think about two different conversations that you've had in, say, the last month or two recently. And for the first conversation, I want you to consider a topic that you talked about in your personal life that was fairly light and casual, something that was related to your daily routine or current events. And imagine yourself in that conversation, thinking about the level of depth that you went to. So just take a minute and think about that, like 10 seconds. All right, and then I want you to think about another conversation. And this one that maybe had higher stakes. Maybe it was more meaningful, more personal. It could have been about your emotions or aspirations, something you've been struggling with, a decision you had to make, and reflect on the depth of that conversation. Just take like 10 seconds. And let's compare these two conversations. Like, what was different about them? How did they feel in terms of your connection and your authenticity? And how do you think these types of conversations compare? How did they compare for you? Do you think they're equally important for building strong relationships? If you could drop any reflections you have in the chat, I'd love to hear what y'all have to say about that. Any kind of, how do these conversations compare to you? What's different about them? Are they equally important?
And if anyone feels comfortable enough coming off mute,
yeah, we'd love to hear your voice.
And you want to raise your hand using the raise hand feature, we'd love to get you in here if you wanted to share something that you're feeling through based on that prompt.
Okay, more important. I think that you're saying the dialogue kind of conversation or the more heavy or high stakes conversation was more important.
Did you notice a difference in the ability to connect? You know, let's say more of the low stakes conversation, was connection even a goal? You know, certain things like that, you know, is what we're asking you to notice. Okay, we have something from Sahai in the chat that says, I do think they are equally important. The one that requires more depth may require more or different emotions. Okay.
Just respecting each other's viewpoints.
Okay.
I would, you know, sometimes I wonder if it's easier to respect people's viewpoints when the stakes are low, you know? Oh, got a hand raised there.
Okay, let's see.
You can go ahead and
T.
come
Jamal,
off mute.
you can come off mute, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was just kind of agreeing with the last statement in the chat that I feel like they both are equally important. They just have different levels to them because honestly, even in relationships, when it comes to like the small things, like just greeting each other or saying thank you or saying please as you get more and more comfortable with somebody, it's typical to kind of avoid doing those small things, and those things build up over time. So even the small little dialogues or just knowing what a person is interested in, those things start to count, so that when it does become a deeper conversation, possibly with that same person, you feel a little bit more comfortable with them. Maybe even you confide in them a little bit better because you know that even when it's not this big of a, you know, a deep issue, they're there and you have built a rapport.
Yeah, I love that reflection. I think that hits on so many of the thoughts I was also having. Even though those like kind of like everyday surface conversations, they help us stay connected over time, right? Those kind of build up together and help us stay connected. Whereas authentic dialogue is like concentrating all of that connection in one kind of smaller area, if that makes sense, right? In our surface level conversations, we're kind of spreading the connection over many different conversations. And in dialogue, we're kind of concentrating the connection a little bit more. So even conversations that stay on the surface can include more empathetic listening and questioning. So even though we're really talking about empathetic questioning and empathetic listening in terms of dialogue, if we were to use that more in our everyday conversations, kind of like what Jamal is saying here, it will help make it easier for when it's time for us to have authentic dialogue. So if we take those lighter conversations as an opportunity to practice for when conversations become more high stakes, now we're better prepared to talk. So, you know, somebody's telling you about their hobbies, don't just say, oh, that's great. Ask them about their hobbies. You know, oh, you play tennis? How long have you been playing tennis? Oh, what do you like about playing tennis, right? And those kind of empathetic questions, even on those light surface conversations, can really be useful. And it gives us a good opportunity to practice. So now that we've reflected, do you have any points on that one?
No, it's great points. You can continue.
Now that we have reflected on this like distinction between these surface conversations and dialogues, which we are saying are important, but we can shift our mindset in both. Let's move on to explore some of the benefits that we will see from implementing authentic dialogue into our personal relationships. So there are a lot. I'm going to talk about them. Building trust. So authentic dialogue is going to help us build trust because we can be open and honest and vulnerable, and we're creating a safe space for other people to do the same. And trust is going to grow when we know that we can share ourselves without being judged. And that is really important in authentic dialogue. When we talk about tolerance, we only talked about it a little bit, but that's that part about not being judged, right? Making sure that somebody feels safe enough to talk to you without you thinking less of them. Reducing misunderstandings. How often have misunderstandings arisen because signals were crossed or our words were misinterpreted? Authentic dialogue is going to allow us to be more clear because it encourages us to listen empathetically, which is more deeply, and it's asking us to ask questions that seek deep understanding. This is going to reduce the chances and the effects of confusion and conflict. Fostering emotional intimacy. True intimacy is going to go beyond just sharing how close you are to each other, and it's going to go beyond those surface level conversations. It's about sharing our innermost thoughts, our fears, our aspirations, and authentic dialogue nurtures this because it allows us to express our deepest emotions in a non-judgmental space. It's going to help us strengthen our connections because conversations that go below the surface, go deeper, they lead to stronger connections, right? Authentic dialogue creates a sense of companionship and loyalty and a feeling that you're truly seen and known and understood by the people who are in your life. Conflict resolution. When conflict arises, authentic dialogue is really a powerful and transformative tool because it will help you address issues with understanding and empathy rather than escalating tensions. And we actually have a conflict resolution framework that we use that incorporates authentic dialogue as well, called Change Up, which we'll probably have some trainings on in the future as well. It might be a webinar about that. It enhances our self-awareness. Like we talked about honest expression and being able to actually say what it is that you mean. That's part of what authentic dialogue helps us do. The more we practice expressing ourselves honestly, the more we become aware of our thoughts, our own emotions. And that self-awareness is really important for our self-growth and our healthier communication and interactions. Benefits, more benefits. What are we up to? 7, encouraging vulnerability. Being vulnerable and being able to step out of your comfort zone and share, that's really what allows people to feel safe with you. Promoting empathy. When we empathetically listen and engage in authentic dialogue, we're better able to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And this empathy enhances understanding and harmony in our relationships. Creating meaningful memories. Like when you were reflecting on the 2 different types of conversations, the surface conversation versus like the more deeper level conversation, you probably had more memories with the deeper one. That's the one that's probably standing out in your mind. Those conversations have an impact on you and they enrich our lives and they encourage closeness between you and those who you're close to. And the last thing is nurturing your own personal growth because it helps you to learn from each other's perspectives. It helps you to evolve together in your personal relationship, and it helps you to support one another's journey. And we're not talking about partnerships here. We are talking about those, but platonic relationships, any type of relationship you have with your siblings or your parents, authentic dialogue can be used for all of these types of relationships, not just one specific kind.
So next, we're going to talk about some tips for authentic dialogue. And besides as you see here on the screen, besides what we've already expressed about empathetic listening, empathetic questioning, tolerance, and honest expression, here are some additional tips for authentic dialogue. Like, for example, number 1, using I statements. So using I statements, especially in a conflict resolution conversation, is a way to get to the heart of an issue way more efficiently and effectively. A lot of times, I've noticed that people in society have a tendency to speak in broad generalities, or they may say, when people X, Y, Z, or when you feel a certain way, instead of saying, how I feel. I always question when I hear people speaking in you, why they don't say I. And when someone says, you all may hear people say, how when you stub your toe and how it feels when X, Y, Z. And like, that's just an example of when people use you. There's many ways that people use the term you instead of using I.
Accusing you, right? You can feel accusatory also.
Yeah. And then also, and that's the other part of the I statement. So it's that part, and it's the part of, instead of pointing the finger at other people, speaking about how things make you feel. So instead of shame and blame energy, you always X, Y, Z, or you never X, Y, Z. When in conflict, situations, it's much more effective to say, I feel hurt. I feel disrespected, or I feel misunderstood when you say or when you do XYZ. So by starting with I, it helps to really get to doing it more efficiently and effectively, tapping into that person's capacity for empathy. Hopefully helping them to understand the impact of a behavior or something that they said. And also, if there's a relationship there, when you talk, generally speaking, when you share with someone who cares about you, how something they've said or done makes you feel, it lands differently, because it's all about, when you talk about how you feel, generally speaking, people don't want to hurt people they love and care about, right? So, and even, I know this is more about the personal, but I know some folks had a lot of questions about the work context. I would hope that even in a work situation that you're in an environment where people care about each other and their impact and how they make each other feel. So, and when by starting with an I statement in terms of like how I feel about a situation, it just helps us get to that empathy and helps us get to the underlying needs and concerns, and that to the heart of the issue that much more efficiently. Another thing to consider here is reflective responses. And when you're having an authentic dialogue and someone is sharing their perspective, you're listening empathetically. Another thing about listening empathetically is you're not cutting them off. Okay. You're letting them finish what they have to say. And, when we facilitate authentic dialogues, whether we do it in a conflict resolution scenario, mediation scenario with a couple or a small group, or we're doing it with a business team, we always implement the idea that people speak in 1 minute or less, say what they have to say in 1 minute or less, so they're not going on and on and on and on. And this makes it easier for others to not want to cut them off. But also it makes it easier for everyone to really understand the heart of what they're trying to say without giving them too much information. So that's something for you to be mindful of, when you're sharing your reflections or sharing your, perspective on something, not to speak too long so the other person can really digest what you're saying. And then this gives the other person, or if you're that person that is listening to someone express themselves, maybe you've asked an empathetic question or two. Another thing that you can do in addition to that is give reflective responses where basically, you are speaking to what resonates with you about what the person has just shared. And it gives you a chance to, really express empathy beyond an empathetic question. It may say, what you said this, that really, when you said XYZ, that really landed with me. And that made me, realize things a little bit deeper. I appreciate you saying it that way. I appreciate you being vulnerable and expressing yourself with me to me in that way. Those are like reflective responses. Another tip is emotional awareness. Okay. So it's really important that when you're having an authentic dialogue, that you're really being present to your emotions. You're really being present to, monitoring, your emotions and how you're feeling in any given moment. And understanding that, not only are you communicating verbally, but, a lot of times our emotions show up bodily. So what are you communicating in your body, the way that you're showing up to the dialogue? Are you aggressive in the way that you talk, in a way that may make other people feel small or make them want to diminish themselves or make them want to just, retreat and not communicate?
Make sure that the way you're feeling is aligning with the way you're communicating. Like, what are you actually trying to convey or express here? I agree with that.
And next we have here mindful presence. Let's talk about that. So basically mindful presence is being fully present in the moment, in the conversation, and not being distracted. Put away your phone, let the person know that you're truly present, put it on do not disturb, turn the TV off, turn the music off when you realize that it's an opportunity for an authentic dialogue. Next, validate feelings. It's really, really important that you take a moment to validate the other person's feelings, even if you don't agree. Because in an authentic dialogue, you don't have to agree with someone. You don't have to change, but you still can validate the fact that the other person's perspectives and feelings are valid for them.
I can understand why you would think that.
Yeah.
I really understand why you would think that, even if you don't think that.
Right. And even if you don't agree with something they're saying, you still can ask empathetic questions to better understand what they're saying. Because you can understand someone without agreement. That's so important to understand about authentic dialogue. And then, just going as far as saying, again, validating their feelings. And when you validate someone's feelings, it builds trust. Okay. I've been in dialogue situations where someone will say something and the next words out of another person's mouth is something that just totally like diminishes everything they just said.
Or yeah, but.
Yeah.
Starting a sentence with yeah, but that's not validating somebody's feelings.
Mm-hmm. All right. Give space for silence. This is another really, really important thing. Some of us are really quick thinkers, quick on our feet. We hear that term, right? Some of us are really quick thinkers and we can respond and we can go back and forth rapid fire. We can make decisions really quickly. Some of us are more reflective. We need to process things before we speak or before we respond. It's really important to be okay with a little bit of silence in the context of an authentic dialogue. It's really okay. I mean, it's really necessary to be okay with silence when you know you're dealing with someone who may be more of a processor, more of a reflective thinker. Just because someone thinks quickly doesn't mean that their feelings are more superior. There's people who are really good at debating, and that's why we have debate clubs in schools and things like that, where people can sharpen their debate skills. And typically, generally speaking, in society, a lot of times, if someone is really gifted in debate, oftentimes it's assumed that this person must be right. They must know what they're talking about. They must be an authority. And it diminishes those people and puts them diminishes them and puts people who are more reflective at a disadvantage. In an authentic dialogue, there's space for both. It's important to create space for both, all communication styles, okay? Next, having a non-judgmental attitude is really, really, really important. It's really important to approach dialogues without a preconceived judgment. And it's really important to understand that we all hold assumptions, but understand that your assumptions will become, I guess, more authentic, more valid when you can share your assumptions, but not hold on to them too tightly, understanding that it's an assumption and understand that the other person's thoughts and perspectives are going to improve on your assumptions. We all walk around with assumptions. We have to make assumptions, but it's important that we interrogate those assumptions and we allow others to do the same. Because when you do that, you come across, again, like you're not judgmental. You're not like some person who thinks they're always right. And you're understanding that in relationship, in communication with the other person or the other people, through a collaboration of communication, right, we can get to what's really real for all of us, what's really true for all of us, based on people, sharing their assumptions and getting other people's reflections on it to bring it into a space where it's something that makes sense for everyone. Okay. I like to share that sometimes in a dialogue, I'll share with someone, I'll preface things by saying, I know this is an assumption, but this is what I was thinking. And then I'll wait for them to give me their response and their reflection on what I was thinking. And that helps me, validate my assumption, whether it was true, whether it was real or not, or if I need to adjust how I'm holding a thought or a belief based on, sharing my assumption with the other person. We talked about avoid interrupting. One of the ways that and I also talked about speaking in 1 minute or less. When we facilitate dialogues with groups, we actually have a timer set up. Okay. And I also recommend that people in relationships, whether it be, a partner, a family member, a sibling, a roommate, someone that you're looking to engage in authentic dialogue with, if you know that you both may struggle with speaking, let's say just 4 sentences or less or 1 minute or less, it's okay to set up a timer, and also to be efficient. We don't want to be here all day. Sometimes that, deteriorates people's capacities to really show up and be fully present. If it's just this long run on, situation where people are talking, it's more alive and more energetic when people are going back and forth and creating space for each other to express themselves. It also ensures that not one person dominates the dialogue, because again, some of us are extroverted, and extroverted people can dominate conversations at times. So having a timer there ensures that, we're keeping that energy flowing back and forth in a respectable, fair manner. And lastly, focus on feelings. Pay attention to the emotions being conveyed not just the words. That's where we talk about listening empathetically and asking empathetic questions and tapping into your intuition, and looking and, reading people's body language, etc.
Yeah, this is not a time to focus on facts. This is a time to focus on how people are feeling about things and leaning into empathy.
Yeah. And, I feel like there's some folks who I know people who are very facts driven, right? And sometimes we have to flex, our styles and be empathetic to how the other person is showing up and try to find common ground. It doesn't mean that, your perspectives are being validated in your mind based on facts that you have, and that can be, what you bring to the dialogue, but it doesn't diminish. You shouldn't do it in a way that diminishes what the other person is bringing. They may be bringing their intuition, their feelings, how they feel about a situation. And then from that place, you two can work towards some common understanding.
Okay, let's see if we're going to practice using these tips. So I'm going to read y'all a scenario between a parent and her child. And I'm actually going to go back to the slide that we just looked at as well. So to remind you all of the tips, just in case you didn't take notes here. So imagine that Sarah, who's a parent, is having a conversation with her teenage child, and her name is Luna. So Sarah notices that Luna has been spending a lot of time on their phone and hasn't been doing well in school lately. So Sarah decides to address the issue. And the conversation goes something like this. Sarah says, Luna, we need to talk about your grades and your phone usage. Your grades have been slipping, and I've noticed you're constantly on your phone. I think using your phone too much is causing your grades to slip. And Luna says, oh, whatever, it's not a big deal. Sarah says, it is a big deal. You need to focus on your studies and stop wasting time on your phone. Luna says, you're always overreacting. You don't understand anything. Sarah says, don't talk to me like that. You need to listen to what I'm saying. Luna rolls their eyes and says, whatever. So let's talk about why this conversation is not an authentic dialogue. And if you could take a moment to think about why you think this one is not authentic, and then give us some answers in the chat if you think you know why this conversation was not at all an authentic dialogue. Yep, Sahai said, I didn't hear any empathetic questions. Neither did I. I don't think I heard any questions.
Anyone else?
Assumption by a parent sounded accusatory. Yep, I like that. Judgmental. Good. Definitely. The parent and the child here are not listening to each other empathetically, right? They're trying to be right here. The mother is like, you need to listen to me because I know what's right. And Luna's like, you don't know anything about me. Because of this interaction, it lacked empathy and it lacked understanding. And the conversation was adversarial, right? There's one pitted against the other. Sarah basically was trying to force Luna to listen, and Luna was refusing. I see this one here that says it was a surface conversation full of judgment. I definitely agree with the judgment part, but this doesn't feel much like a surface conversation here, because this was a conflict, and conflicts can't be surface. You have to kind of get to the root so that you can understand underlying concerns, fears, for it to be productive, if that makes sense. So this should have been an authentic dialogue. Let's go back to the slide that we just looked at here, where we talked about the tips. Which of these tips for practicing authentic dialogue do you think could have been used to move this conversation more in the direction of empathetic listening and empathetic questioning? Take a moment to think, and considering the scenario, which one of these you think would have been helpful, most helpful?
Anyone have any ideas?
Yeah, you can drop them in the chat or come off mute if you like.
Go ahead and release the chat as we're going through. And I'm going to lead us in one more activity. This is just, this can be something that you take home with you.
Okay, all right. The use of I statements from T. Jamal here. The use of I statements from the mother would have been helpful. I agree. Sarah could have expressed her concerns using those I statements. It would have communicated her thoughts and her feelings. I agree. Surfaced because it appears to be their dynamic. Neither was really listening to the other. Agreed. If they were emotionally aware of the other's tone, there would have been space to hear the unstated. Agreed. If both of them had really listened to understand without interrupting and without being resistant to hearing what the other had to say, I definitely think it would have gone better. Ooh, non-judgmental attitude, definitely. Emotional awareness, 100, yeah, agreed. Non-judgmental attitude, use of I statements. I'm worried about your grades for these reasons. Yes, excellent. Asking how you were feeling about your grades. Honestly, like I agree with, I think that's exactly what, Mel, I'm agreeing with you 100%. This conversation would have gone much better if Sarah had started by actually just expressing her concern, right? Using an I statement. I've noticed your grades have been slipping and I'm worried about your well-being. Much less accusatory than you're spending too much time on your phone and your grades are slipping, right? So it's much less confrontational when you start with an I statement. And she could have asked empathetic questions to understand Luna's perspective. Can you share what has been going on with you lately? Something along those lines. And Luna, we can't just only blame Sarah here. Luna could have responded openly, right? After, I've been struggling with some things at school, maybe I've been using my phone as a distraction. And then Sarah would have maybe had an opportunity to respond with more empathy, right? Something, thank you for sharing that with me. I understand that school can be tough sometimes. That's validating Luna's feelings. And the conversation could have then continued with both parties empathetically listening and validating each other's feelings and actually seeking a solution together. Asking, how are you feeling about your grades? Yeah, I agree. How do you feel? Do you think your grades are going, do you think school is going well for you? If this doesn't sound like a realistic exchange between a teen and a parent to you, I encourage you to begin modeling these types of conversations in your daily life. And it might take some time, but if you and your teen or you and someone are having difficult conversations that are like Sarah's and Luna's, it seems like this is not a realistic exchange. It seems like there's no way you could have had this conversation in a calm way. But if you're constantly modeling these types of experiences in these conversations, you will see it become more a part of your life. Yeah, anything to add to that, Sundara?
I think you covered it perfectly. I guess what I can say is just to, confirm everything that Shani shared with you all is that, I have a teenage daughter and a son who's 11, who I've been communicating with in the authentic dialogue manner for many years now. And, I'm always, it reaffirms my work when I hear about parents who have power struggles or arguments with their children in these ways. And I'm always like, it doesn't have to be that way. And I understand that a lot of times that, people just don't know what to replace the old way of doing things, the old way of resolving conflict, which often looks like the scenario that Shani just read. And luckily, and I'm grateful that you all are here because you're learning, a new way. You're learning some new skills like I learned, many, many years ago. And it just gives me, again, it just gives me hope to continue to do this work, to share this with people, because a lot of people don't want to have power struggles and arguments with the people in their lives, whether they be their children or their loved ones. And hopefully you're able to take some of these tips and skills and replace those arguments and power struggles with authentic dialogue.
All right. I just to piggyback off of that, I totally agree. It's amazing how different your conversations can be with people when you actually open the conversations with talking about how you feel genuinely.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, as a parent, especially because we're talking about this parent-child situation, sometimes parents don't do that, right? We don't start talking to our children, telling them how we feel. We start talking to our children, telling them what they need to do. And if we change that approach, telling them how we feel, you'd be so surprised at how things change and open up between you and your children, because now you've told them how you feel. So they come back and they tell you how they feel. And it's a fun exchange. And hopefully in some future webinars, we can get into this too, because this stuff right here, we could talk about this all day.
Yeah, and we do. We have several trainings and things, but we'll talk about that a little bit later.
All right, so Q&A time. We asked for questions to come into the webinar, but if you have any specific questions that have come up during this webinar while you've been watching, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll try to answer them for you like right here. We also have a couple of questions, a few that we can talk about as well. But if you have any questions, you've got anything that has come up, anything specific that you've been going through recently, that you want some feedback on, any of that stuff, you can drop it in the chat and we'll try to help.
Or you can come off mute and ask.
That too, you come off mute. We can get started with one here, and if y'all want to jump in, you can. I'm just going.
Well, yeah. I see that someone came off mute.
Who came off?
Sahai, did you want to ask something for Tricia?
No, not right now.
Okay.
Oh.
All right, so let's go ahead and start with
what steps? So this was a question that we actually got through the webinar registration. So we have some questions that we asked y'all if you had them. So here's one. What steps can I take towards building a mindset of listening to understand rather than listening to respond? Love that question, because it's really hard to get out of that mindset for sure.
I would say that the first step is literally just being aware. And because whoever shared this question, the awareness that you have that that's something that you do, that you have the tendency to listen to respond versus listening to understand is the first step. Then from there, I would say that, learning the skills that we've talked about here today about authentic dialogue, learning them and practicing them. And that's how you're going to get better. And that's how you're going to move away from that knee-jerk reaction, which is just to respond. And one of the things that I found is that it's easier to engage with another person in authentic dialogue if they've also opted in to having an authentic dialogue with me. If I'm in authentic dialogue mode and another person is in debate mode, and they're trying to dominate, they're trying to win, they're trying to talk over me, it's not going to go very well. So we have a process for how we teach people how to invite people into an authentic dialogue. So, learning that process, and I'll just say it here, and I know there's some other questions that this might touch on as well, but, something as simply as saying to someone, hey, so-and-so, I hear you, but I don't want to get into really a back and forth debate, and that could lead to an argument. Can we agree to hear each other out and take turns speaking and listening and trying to work towards some common ground? And then stop and wait for them to respond. And typically someone's going to say yes if you ask them in that way, right? So now when you're listening to understand, you can now go into modeling the skills of listening to understand, and empathetic listening, empathetic questioning, et cetera, and then asking them to do the same for you, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a moment.
I see a question in the chat that kind of just made me that made me feel like, because I've been through this personally. So Mel asked, ways to practice simplifying what you're trying to say for those folks who struggle to summarize their feelings on the spot. Think sometimes emotions get the best of those of us who feel pressure to get out our points succinctly and start panicking. I can very much relate to this, participating in an authentic dialogue and being kind of concerned that I won't be understood. Right, that there's not going to be a way for this person to really understand my point. So one of the things that you kind of have to have some faith in is that empathetic questions are going to allow you to elaborate your point, that you'll get more of an opportunity to be understood, because let's say you only have 1 minute to talk. after that minute's up, you're like, oh, I didn't get to say everything that I wanted. Like there's still more, but you kind of have to let the other person like process and chew on that first thing that you were saying. Let them respond to that. Let them ask you empathetic questions about that. And there will be time for you to be heard later. Like if there are things that you need to say and add, there will be empathetic questions that will allow you to elaborate, and you'll be able to directly respond and get more information from the other person. So you have to have faith in that. I think have faith in the process, especially once you get good at it and you start learning how it really works and you practice with it. You'll see that you will be heard before the end of the dialogue.
Yeah, I'm going to 12.
Okay, so what's the best way to prepare for a conversation with someone who has never heard of or used authentic dialogue?
Yeah, great question. And it gives me a chance to kind of elaborate on what I was just talking about prior to the last question that Shani addressed, which is, ideally, you want to be in a situation where you and the other person or other people have both learned about authentic dialogue. Ideally, that's the case, right? But, most of the time, one person's learning about it first, and then you're trying to learn these skills and start implementing them. And as I said before, if you don't, I always say step one in an authentic dialogue is for both or all parties to opt in. If people don't opt into an authentic dialogue and you two are communicating in two different communication paradigms and frameworks, you're going to feel that tension. So if someone is in debate mindset, which most people typically are, right, and you're in authentic dialogue mindset, it's not going to feel good and it's not going to go well. So if you're talking to someone that has never been exposed to this concept and never been trained on it, it's important for you to be patient and ask the right questions that will lead them in a direction of having an authentic dialogue with you. As I said before, the first question you ask is if they are okay having a dialogue with you, right? Because typically that will trigger something in someone's mind where you're like, I'm trying to do something different. I don't want to argue. I don't want to fight. I don't want to yell. I don't want to debate. Can we have a dialogue where we hear each other out? Or can we have a dialogue where we take turns speaking and listening, and then, so that we can understand each other and then try to, agree on a solution? Like asking any type of question like that to start and then pausing and waiting for them to say yes is imperative if you're dealing with someone that doesn't know how to have an authentic dialogue. Once they say yes, then you say, okay, great, you go first, right? And then you let them start expressing themselves first. And you get a chance to model empathetic listening, right? And then when they're done, you get to ask an empathetic question and model that. Paraphrase back what you heard, ask empathetic questions. Yeah, at least 2, right? And then once that's over, now you say to them, okay, great. I really understand, what you're saying and how you feel. I would like to share my perspective now. Would you'll notice that I listened to you completely. I didn't cut you off, and I asked you questions to understand you better. Can you do the same thing for me while I'm speaking? And then you pause and you wait, right? And then again, more often than not, they're going to say yes because of the way you showed up for them. So it's interesting how people keep coming off mute. Okay. So then you get the chance to express yourself, and hopefully they'll do the same things, listen to you empathetically, ask you some empathetic questions, right? And here's the thing. Sometimes people are knee-jerk are going to cut you off. They're going to want to jump in because that's what they're used to doing. And that's when you say, hold on, remember, I didn't cut you off and I listened to you. Can you please do the same for me? Just gently remind them, because people are so used to that rapid fire back and forth, so used to dominating and cutting people off to make, themselves seem, right.
And as you do this more, you will, this other person will start to get into that practice. This is just when it's new, because the more you practice, the better you're going to get at this. The more naturally empathetic questions will come to you. Sometimes that's an issue that I think some people have when they're here early on. They're like, how do I know what to ask? You know, I don't know what kind of empathetic questions. You become more practiced. You start to lean in more to what it is that they're saying and their underlying fears or underlying concerns. So like with most things, it takes practice, right? That's really the key. So if you're trying this with someone brand new who's never done this before, you're going to have to take it easy and be patient with them. But over time, as you continue to model this and you continue to participate in this in your personal life, you see it become much more smooth.
Yeah. And I've done a training on this that's in our for the workplace, but it talks about some of the mechanics that I just went through. If anyone wants to go deeper into what I was just saying, it talks about the mechanics. I've also written a blog post on this topic. And again, Shani and I are going to be releasing, we'll share more towards the end, but we're going to have trainings that go a lot deeper than this overview we're giving you here today. But I hope that made sense.
I'm just doing a little check-in at the time here. It's 2:01, so we've been on here for an hour. We're probably gonna answer a couple more questions, but if we, can maybe wrap up for anybody who needs to run, if you thought this was just an hour, and if you want to stay on and hear some of the questions that we have, you can. But I think
Yes.
Let's go ahead and get to the action steps. So remember, you got to stay self-aware. As we reach the end of this webinar, we're at our action steps now. And what I just said is that authentic dialogue is going to require you to shift your mindset, and it's going to require some practice and patience.
Okay.
Comfort zone a little bit, but it's really important to also approach authentic dialogue with the same non-judgmental attitude that you approach the actual authentic dialogue with, right? Don't judge yourself. You are going to get it. It's not about getting it right. It's about making a conscious effort to cultivate more meaningful interactions and more meaningful conversations. So even if you don't get it right, like even if you don't feel like you're getting it correct, you don't feel like you're doing it right, it's about the effort. And the more you practice, the more you will lean into empathetic questions. So
yeah. So again, self-awareness, starting small, begin with the people that are closest to you, close family members and friends, and practice with them. And again, practice that empathy. Now that you're aware, be patient. If you're someone that has the inclination to want to cut people off and dominate conversation, be patient, step back, give people a chance to express themselves. And most importantly, model the behaviors, so that as you're modeling the behaviors, then maybe, and you're showing up differently, then maybe that will encourage others to tap into the trainings in these webinars like you are to learn more. We have blog posts that go out, folks can sign up for our mailing list, and invite your people to sign up for these resources, because in that mailing list we send out invites to these webinars, we send out info about the different courses and offerings, and also blog posts that go deeper into the concepts that we're sharing here with you all today.
it's hard to model sometimes when people are kind of trying to force you into debate. But I think as you continue to do it, like Sunjata said earlier, where he's like, hey, this is how I showed up like this for you. Can you show up like this for me? It feels kind of maybe like you're saying repetitive, but if you keep modeling it, it will improve. So thank you all for joining us. You can find us on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook, and please check out the website, www.growdialogue.com. There's business solutions for your business teams there, and there's personal solutions more for what we've been talking about here today. And we'll drop the link to the personal solutions page in here as well, in the chat as well. All right.
So yeah, I think that's a good place to stop. We appreciate all of you all for being here. So we'll go ahead and drop that in the chat, since this was a personal solutions webinar. And please explore. We have a lot of free resources there for you to explore that will really take you even further than we took you here today. Also, we want to invite you to sign up for the community that we are going to be launching here soon, which is the Thriving Relationships Community. And I'm going to drop a link to that in the chat as well. Okay, maybe I'm not. I think it might have the wrong link. So what I'll say is stay tuned to your email address, because we're gonna be sending some info out soon, and most of you are already signed up for our mailing list. So we'll send some info about that, but there's going to be a library of trainings that gets into the meta, into the granular details of the things that we gave you all an overview about here today. So if any of this made sense, if it sparked some curiosity, if it sparked an interest to really want to improve on your skills in authentic dialogue, I would say explore our page on the Personal Solutions page. That one link that I was mentioning that says Thriving Communities, you'll see it there. And it's not working right now. I just have to make a fix. I see some technical difficulties, and I'll have it fixed within the next 10 minutes, where you'll be able to go and see more details about what's going to be included in that Thriving Relationships community in terms of the library of training videos that we're releasing there, and the coaching as well. So thank you all for your time, and there'll be more to come, and we hope to see you all again soon.
Yeah, for the next one.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Have a good one, y'all.
Peace. Thank you.
Hey. Cool.